In Xi'an, a pregnant woman sat on her bed, sobbing in despair. Her home value plummeted from 3.6 million yuan to 1.4 million yuan, a loss of 2.2 million yuan almost overnight. According to her plan, she's facing the risk of defaulting on her mortgage due to her reduced income. It's not only the house she might lose. If it's foreclosed, she may even end up owing more. With her due date approaching, she feels utterly overwhelmed by the blow.
The pressure is so intense. My heart is exhausted. I argued with my wife today over the mortgage. We had a huge fight. She told me, "If you can't even handle the mortgage, what good are you?" I feel like such a failure. Every day I work so hard, constantly out there trying to earn money, but there's no reward. I haven't found a suitable job, and making 3 or 4,000 yuan a month doesn't cover our needs. Life feels unbearably difficult, and the pressure is immense.
There's an old saying in China, for couples living in poverty, every little thing brings sorrow. With a downturn in China's economy, incomes are falling while mortgage and car loan payments weigh heavily on people's shoulders. Did you pay the mortgage this month?
Not yet.
And the car loan?
Not paid either.
Did we manage to pull together the child's kindergarten fees?
No, not yet.
How are we supposed to keep going like this?
We'll manage.
How can we in this state?
What choice do we have? What do you want me to do?
I don't want to live like this with you anymore. Recently, house prices keep hitting new lows, and these financial pressures are pushing many marriages to the breaking point. The topic of couples divorcing due to falling home prices has gone viral on Weibo, becoming a hot topic among users.
刚才刷微博啊，看到这条热搜。
I just saw this topic trending on Weibo. People are getting married because of houses, and now divorcing because of houses. The reason? Their homes are worth much less than what they owe. Here's what it means. Your home value has dropped, but your debt hasn't. Many people now owe more on their homes than they're worth. Some have lost everything but the down payment. And yet, the bank loans remain the same, only slightly reduced by lower interest rates on some mortgages. So, how many of these rising divorces are linked to mortgage burdens? While we don't have specific statistics, the official narrative would likely blame economic issues. I think the impact is significant, especially for families who went into debt after 2017 just to pay a down payment. When both the house and the marriage are leveraged, how stable can that marriage be? Does the state still need to investigate why people don't want or can't afford to have children? Isn't the answer right here, in high property prices? In China's One Literary Lifestyle Weekly, stories detail how the first batch of couples affected by falling home prices have already entered the cooling-off period for divorce, hinting that these declines in housing values have become a major driver behind the spike in divorce rates across the mainland. The wife in the first couple, who goes by the name Qiu, shared her story. I'm not the first in my circle to divorce because of the drop in home prices. I always thought we wouldn't end up like that. I used to believe only wealthy couples divorced due to falling home values. Those people didn't really have much connection. They were held together only by kids, houses, things like that. Now that the house prices have dropped, everyone wants to turn their properties into cash, split up, and move on happily. But for us, it was different. We're just ordinary working people. Qiu and her ex-husband owned 2 properties, one in Fangshan District, Beijing, and another in Qingdao, both purchased with mortgages. Her ex worked for a major company, while Qiu worked as a designer at a state-owned enterprise. When they bought the homes, they were in the prime of their careers and eager to push forward, as were most of their friends who bought homes at that stage. Now everyone regrets it deeply. The couple had planned to wait a few years for the Beijing house's value to rise before starting a family. They hoped to sell the Fangshan property and buy a smaller place closer to the city center. But things changed, and so did the housing market. Their Fangshan house's value fell sharply, from 2.3 million yuan to 1.6 million yuan. Not long after, their marriage fell apart too. As a couple working in Beijing, everything started to crumble. First, Qiu's promotion hopes faded, and then her husband's performance-based pay was cut in half, putting him at risk of layoffs. There weren't major problems between them, but they started to lose respect for each other. Chu Chu recalled, "It was my ex who suggested both divorce and selling the house. He wanted to cut losses before both the property and marriage lost more value. The house in Qingdao was under his name since his parents paid the down payment, but we shared the mortgage. The Beijing home was under my name, and both our parents had contributed to it, with us making payments together. He proposed keeping the Qingdao property, selling the Beijing house, and splitting the money, considering the parental contribution as gifts. When he laid out this plan, I was stunned. He didn't give me a moment to react or think." Chu Chu disagreed with her ex's proposal. She felt that, even though his family covered the down payment, her family also paid for renovations. Besides, their finances were so intertwined that a simple division wasn't possible. If things were going to be split, she wanted everything combined first and handled through a lawyer for an equitable division. Initially heartbroken over the divorce, Chu Chu's resolve strengthened when she heard his unfair plan. She skipped the painful back and forth and made up her mind immediately. Looking back, she felt fortunate they didn't have children and relieved that she made the smart choice to divorce at 35 instead of 55. Currently, Chu Chu and her ex-husband are still negotiating. While there's a slight hint of recovery in Beijing's property market, both seem drained, and their marriage seems beyond repair. "I'm not in a hurry," Chu Chu explained. "I designed the Beijing home myself, so I'm attached to it. My ex is eager to cash out and return to Qingdao. He might have had this exit strategy planned all along. It's bittersweet. A couple is supposed to stand together, yet with the falling house prices, we're each going our own way." Lao Jin is another person who divorced due to plummeting property values. "It's hard not to argue, especially when you bought a non-essential house at the peak of the market," he said. Lao Jin and his wife bought their home in the fall of 2021, a second-hand apartment in an old neighborhood in the city. They were told it was move-in ready with a full renovation, but in reality, the apartment was furnished with the previous owner's unwanted old furniture. At first, Lao Jin didn't want to buy a house because it was only a 10-minute drive from their small town to the city. Plus, he had already built a comfortable 2-story home back in his hometown. But his wife kept insisting on buying a city apartment, even threatening to divorce him if he didn't go through with it. The topic of buying a home led to countless arguments between them. Lao Jin said, "She complained daily that I was too stingy, refusing to buy her a house. She kept saying that if I didn't buy it, she would never have a good life with me." He further explained, "It's not that I didn't want to buy, it's just that the housing prices in our county were absurdly high. In a place where the average monthly income is about 3,000 yuan, property prices hit over 10,000 yuan per square meter, and even older apartments were around 8,000 yuan per square meter. It was way too expensive." At the time, Lao Jin's shop was doing well, so he scraped together over 600,000 yuan to buy the apartment, barely getting a chance to enjoy the money he'd earned. But then the pandemic hit, and his business started losing money. He had to downsize to a smaller storefront, and now his income only covers basic living expenses. He's working non-stop now, without even a moment to rest, just to keep up with the mortgage payments. His wife, who works at a bank, also faces a salary delay. They have 2 sons. The younger one is in full-time daycare, costing 1,200 yuan a month. The older one will start high school next year. His grades aren't great, so they're looking at a private school, which will be another big expense. Lao Jin admitted, "Last year, I wanted to sell the house, but it's been listed for a year with no buyers. Housing prices keep dropping, but the real estate market isn't slowing down. Several construction sites in the city are still active. Newer complexes are reducing prices, so older areas are nearly unmarketable." Nowadays, all conversations with his wife devolve into arguments, often circling back to their apartment. With property fees and heating costs coming due, she's been complaining almost daily. The one silver lining Lao Jing mentioned was at the parking spot that came with the house. He sometimes sits there to clear his head, but after enduring constant quarrels, he and his wife eventually divorced. Looking at recent data, in September, property values dropped by more than 5% year-over-year in 69 out of 70 cities. Housing prices nationwide are in steep decline, with no sign of stabilizing, let alone rebounding. Another real estate agent shared a similar method involving divorce as a tactic to reclaim property.
With house prices plummeting, are you brave enough to default? I saw a clever trick. Couples divorce on paper, with one partner leaving with no assets, taking on the full debt. Then the default on the mortgage. If a buyer wants to bid on a foreclosed house, they'll hear stories about an 80-year-old occupant refusing to leave, scaring them off. This way, the initial auction price drops significantly, and then the other partner buys the house back at a reduced price. They keep their home and continue living as usual. The partner with the debt can find cash-paying jobs or even stay unemployed, leaving the bank with no recourse.
As home prices keep falling, more couples are divorcing. Usually, the woman initiates it to split the assets, while the man leaves with nothing. It looks like the woman gains full ownership, but then the man buys it back using a low down payment and high leverage. They arrange for the child to have permanent residence rights in the house, then default, letting the bank foreclose. With permanent residency rights, the home doesn't attract buyers, and the price drops to 40 to 50% of its value. Finally, the woman buys the house back at the lowest price, securing both cash and property. It's a reminder of how people exploit the system, or perhaps the greed that drives us. In reality, these debt-reducing divorces are just examples of grassroots tactics to counter official policies. Over the years, the Chinese government has used real estate speculation and economic leverage to absorb people's savings. Naturally, people are also finding ways to protect their own assets. Ultimately, the way homeowners are now turning the tables on the banks reflects how the government has fallen into an economic trap of its own making. While divorce rates remain high and marriage rates continue to drop, the Ministry of Civil Affairs released a notice on October 23rd, encouraging marriage registration offices to be set up in parks and other pleasant locations, aiming to provide better services and a more beautiful environment for couples. Currently, there are over 270 park-style marriage registration sites across the country. The ministry also stated that it will launch a pilot program in 2 phases to facilitate cross-provincial marriage registration for mainland residents, allowing couples to register their marriage without having to return to their place of household registration. As of September 2024, 21 provinces can handle this, covering almost 80% of the population. By this time, 416,000 couples have registered cross-provincially. However, this announcement sparked mockery online. One netizen joked, "They're getting desperate to promote marriage. They might as well place them in grocery stores and offer free marriage certificates with eggs." The reason for the mockery is clear. With the economy in decline, many young people in China feel that marriage, childbearing, buying a house, or even buying a car is an unrealistic burden on their future. China's marriage numbers have declined for 9 consecutive years. By December 28, 2023, analysis revealed that in 2022, the unmarried rate among young people aged 25 to 29 was 51%, and for those aged 30 to 34, it was 18%. In the 35 to 39 age group, the rate was 8%. When the topic of high unmarried rates went viral on Weibo, it garnered over 200 million views, with many users predicting the rate would continue rising. Surveys have shown that young people are reluctant to have children because of the harshness of the Chinese education system. For many urban women, marriage is no longer an economic necessity due to their increasing financial independence and educational attainment. Men also cite the unaffordable costs of marriage, compounded by cultural pressures to own a home and car before dating. The economy has remained sluggish post-pandemic, affected by the real estate downturn, local government debt, and high youth unemployment. As a result, many young people hold a pessimistic view of the future and of marriage. Economic experts remain skeptical about any economic improvement, with many predicting that growth will be even lower than in 2023. The housing market slump and stagnant consumption are now expected to persist. In the first half of 2024, only 3.4 million couples registered to marry in China, marking the lowest rate since 1986. In the first quarter, nearly 2 million couples registered, down 178,000 from the same period in 2023. Local governments continue to roll out marriage incentives, like the policy in Changshan County, which offered a 1,000 yuan reward to newlywed couples if the bride is 25 or younger. Yet, few young people are persuaded to marry. Instead, what resonated more is a comment from a popular tech blogger. who has over 500,000 followers. He posted, "If marriage was truly appealing, would anyone need to be persuaded? If there's money on the ground, who wouldn't pick it up?" To date, the government's policies have had a disastrous impact on the Chinese economy, a trend that accelerated in 2020 and has now reached a point where the consequences are impossible to ignore. In 2020, Chinese authorities began to reform the real estate sector, causing many developers to collapse as they lost access to bank loans. This left local governments, which relied heavily on land sales, facing severe debt challenges. The strict zero-COVID lockdown policies during the pandemic further strained local economies, while crackdowns on private enterprises stifled private investment and limited job opportunities for university graduates. Amid rising U.S.-China tensions, President Xi Jinping's push for self-reliance and technology diverted resources away from initiatives that could have helped ease economic difficulties. So far this year, China's home sales have plummeted by 24%. The production price index has declined for 2 consecutive years due to overproduction in factories, and the consumer price index is hovering near deflation. China's economy is grappling with an array of challenges: hundreds of vacant or unfinished apartments, rising youth unemployment, declining wages, and policies that favor high-tech industry over traditional economic pillars. This has led to a cycle where businesses are hesitant to invest, consumers are reluctant to spend, and local governments struggle to provide essential public services. September brought more grim news, with Chinese manufacturing remaining in deflation for the second consecutive year, placing significant pressure on corporate profits. Even exports, a key driver of China's economy, unexpectedly slowed that month. As Wall Street Journal columnist Walter Russell Mead put it, China's stubborn support for an export-driven manufacturing model has led it down a path of diminishing domestic returns and rising international tensions. The Chinese government has effectively fallen into an economic trap of its own making. Meanwhile, the rising divorce rate in China reflects the fallout from the property bubble, potentially laying deeper social issues for the future.